Greetings from the C.M. Russell Museum. I'm Executive Director Tom Figarelle, and welcome to yet another installment of the 2020 Art in Action Artist Showcase. Given the dynamics of the coronavirus, we're conducting a remote art in action and a remote Russell exhibition and sale here in 2020. All of that will occur on September 12th. But leading into that, we're showcasing and profiling a variety of artists who will participate in art in action. Art in action, as many of you know, is this exciting variation of a traditional quick draw or quick finish, where nationally known artists have a certain period of time to complete a work while interacting with guests. So given the limitations of a remote situation here, you won't see the artist working on their piece. But what hopefully these showcases provide you is a little bit of that interaction, some dialogue with the artist to understand how they're doing, given the circumstances of the day, what's inspiring them, their process, and what they're working on. The Art in Action and all of our educational programs are sponsored by D.A. Davidson Companies, who help us advance the art and soul of the American West. And for that, we are very grateful. And we are joined today by artist Colt Idol. Colt, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I mentioned, one of the things we like to talk about in these series are just, how are you doing? So, that question to you, how's things on your end?
All things considered, not too bad. We're really busy up in our area with a lot of show cancellations and shows moving virtual. A lot of artists have busy summers, such a seasonal market and industry. So we've been able to camp a bunch. We've been able to spend a lot of time outside. And then I've been able to get a lot of time in the studio. Normally, not this much time. Normally, it's just kind of a whirlwind for 4 months, and then you breathe in the fall, sure. And then you start getting ready for the Russell. So,
well, good. So you've been able to invest in your craft a little bit, with this downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. While remaining very fortunate to that things are still moving. We're able to sell some artwork and keep that engine running.
Well, good for you. Good for you. That's a blessing. And, being constructive with your time certainly is a therapeutic way to kind of endure these challenges. You mentioned, in the fall is when you usually get ready for the Russell, and you've been an active participant in Art in Action. I'd say in many respects, kind of a fan favorite for a lot of your collectors that come interact with you. Obviously vie for your piece during the Art in Action auction. Why does that type of format, that quick draw, quick finish style, why does that attract you as an artist?
For me, I may not do as much either public or plein air painting as a lot of other artists may. I might do 2 live painting events a year. And for me, I have to be very prepared, and I do enjoy articulating the process while I'm doing it. Sometimes I'll talk out loud when I'm in my studio, and I find it very helpful to speak out loud about what I'm doing, even for myself, to understand why I'm doing some of the things. I enjoy that element. I don't mind it's not a distraction for the people. I don't mind the crowds or anything like that. The only bit of pressure I'd say is it's so hard to finish a painting for me. Sometimes I'll let it sit in the studio for a month and put it up and stare at it and then take it down and stuff. So that's usually my stress in the event, is ensuring that I'll be able to finish the piece in that amount of time. But I'd say the overall, the biggest attraction is just the energy. It's a great feel, and it's kind of it's contagious to an artist. You get caught up in it. You're just kind of pumped up.
Nice. Yeah, there's an energy, like you said. There's kind of maybe a little bit of an adrenaline rush too, right? Because you do have a deadline.
Yeah.
And you have patrons that you want to see, people that you have relationships with coming up and visiting with you. I'm sure don't want to shortchange those relationships, but you still have a piece to produce. You brought up something, Colt, that I just want to ask a follow-up on, finishing a piece. I mean, obviously I would assume, every artist, when they enter into doing a work you know, they maybe have this sense of what the composition will be. And so you have a sense of the end state. Maybe I'll emphasize a sense of it. But how do you really know when a piece is done? I mean, do you make that decision? Does the piece kind of make that decision for you? I mean, what is that dynamic like?
Right. It's a really interesting concept because I think it's unlike a lot of other tasks that you would do, that you would take from start to finish. The end is really subjective. And I like to have, 10, 20% of experimentation in there, opportunities for spontaneity. And the downside to that is that in an event such as that, you could take a piece that's pretty close and almost destroy it. You start,
Sure.
for me, kind of loosen up maybe with the palette knife, add some heavy paint here, or try to make a bold move here or there, and it can backfire. But there's also the fear of when taking a piece to completion, of overworking it. And that's something that I really trust my gut with now. Can really start to feel when I'm going over the hump that, okay, this thing has sort of a natural sense to it, and I'm starting to lose that. It's starting to feel overworked. A lot of the things that I'm doing, the time I'm spending on, is not adding to the piece. Now, I think after about 10 years, I can kind of spot that now. If anatomical things and other compositional rules are being followed, and I'm making sure that I'm not leaving out something that's more of an objective part, then I can really kind of rely on my gut and say, this feels right, feels balanced, it's not overworked. And that's kind of nice feelings. I remember in the early years of painting, you'd almost feel lost getting near the end. I'd get these pieces to about 75%, and I'd dread working on them again because I either didn't know I knew something was needed and I didn't know exactly what it was, or I'd have certain parts that were working and I'd lose that. So I do think at this point, it's, to put it as simply as I can, it's just kind of a gut feeling now.
Sure. Yeah, a little bit of intuition, right? But I also hear you saying that there's a little bit of a discipline involved in it that's probably born out of your experience at this point. So no, I think that's fascinating. And as someone who's not an artist, I can just always appreciate, as you're getting to that end point, I mean, you got to make some decisions that very much will impact the piece overall, but don't want to be overlooked either. So no, thanks for sharing that and giving us a little bit of a diagram there.
Yeah.
I see you've got some works behind you. You mind sharing what you're working on right now?
Sure. So I'm pretty excited. I just built this studio. It's on our property up here. We're in Whitefish, Montana, and I was working out of an office in the house. And I was planning to get this done right before heading to Great Falls. And so that was kind of a shock when I was finishing up all this project and all the shows are getting canceled.
You had more time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. But so I'll just kind of walk you. I got 3 pieces here that I'm for the art in action that are all kind of in various stages. So I have one on the easel here that's got the half-lit teepee and the aspens, and
oh, sure, absolutely,
in some sense of an experimental stage with light. I really like getting to this point and playing around with the color and light, kind of leaving the reference behind at this point, and clumping leaves and painting in stems where they feel right. Here I've got 2 24 by 36s. One is from a Roland Reed photograph in Glacier National Park from an old black and white, and then the other is just kind of a lone cowboy on a ridge line with the sunset backdrop. So, and then this piece here on the easel is a 20 by 36, 20 by 36 here, and then both these are 24 by 36. So I'm trying to find one of those. I kind of want to advance all 3 of them and pick which one's best for the art in action.
Well, very nice. We appreciate you sharing those. One thing that has always struck me by your work, and I think, the most obvious piece for a lot of folks is your light and how you introduce light into your pieces. But what I would almost say is how you introduce shadow and darkness. and have that play off the light. I mean, to me, that would be incredibly difficult to have that appropriate complement between those two, to not have your shadow or your dark be just too overwhelming and your light not doing the same, and just kind of drowning everything out. But you strike this great balance that is just, you know, a real compliment to your talent and work. And I think people have always appreciated that. And the first piece that you showed us there with that teepee just really kind of, you know, reaffirmed that in my mind, is just how you're able to balance and maintain that finesse between shadow and light. Just wonderful. Oh, now you're back. There you go.
You know?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. In painting light, I found that the most important part is the dark. It's very easy to control lighter values. It's very easy to use lighter values. And it's kind of the natural inclination to use light values when portraying light. But without that dark anchor, it's really hard to pull off an intense sense of light. So on every piece of mine, I try to have the full value range, you know, the lightest light and the darkest dark, and those lightest light using that very sparingly to keep that punch located to, or, you know, restricted to the key areas. And then with the shadows, when you get a lot of dark values and a lot of dark colors in the shadow or what have you, it's important that those remain clean. And this has been something I used to study a lot on color theory. And I had these books that were almost like paint swatches that you'd get at a hardware store, where they were recipe books with 10,000 color recipes. You know, you buy 2 colors, and with these, they give you it's almost like a math equation. And that's kind of how I see it now, mixing color. It's this plus this plus this equals this, and you can make any color on earth. But you know what works, where your complements are, so you can avoid getting muddy colors. You keep your colors clean. And so I really like to overemphasize interesting colors in the shadows, so you don't get dark, kind of uninteresting areas.
Yeah.
So
sure.
using color throughout, but, you know, color control, I think, has been one of the hardest things to kind of get a handle on.
No, I think that makes sense, because otherwise, if you weren't adhering to those principles, the shadows would probably just seem fairly vanilla, and I mean, just kind of all blend in and lose a lot of character. So no, I think that makes good sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, you've shared a lot about just kind of your creative approach, but you know, just a question that I'm sure everybody's interested in: when you get an idea, Colt, how do you take that idea and build it into a final piece? I mean, if you could explain that A to Z process for folks out there, I think that would be really intriguing.
Sure. So a lot of these, they start with, you're usually starting with either tangible or non-tangible reference. I might have either photography that I've taken from, you know, Glacier Park, or from national parks with wildlife, or some of these artist retreats for cowboys and Native American subject matter, or it's a completely abstract created scene, such as that teepee, for example. This is me kind of saying, I can start to see this in my head, but I don't really have a real place in mind. We're going to fit all the elements into place for the sake of the painting, not for the sake of creating something real.
Sure.
Beyond that, you kind of go in with a color theory in mind, at least have in your head what colors you plan on using. And that's important, so you don't get in there and just get all over the map with colors that don't work together here and there and whatnot. I do a lot of experimentation. I sometimes draw the painting out first in pencil. Sometimes I'll draw it or paint it in with the brush with no underdrawing, and then give myself the opportunity to experiment and succeed or fail. I have a lot of paintings that I will put a significant amount of time in that go nowhere, and it just kind of fall flat. I hopefully have less and less of those these days.
Sure.
But I think that part's important. That's when you have breakthroughs, is when you're really kind of experimenting and trying to go out of your boundary, try new things. but I don't, it's hard to explain at this point. I really just kind of follow my, like you said before, intuition, gut, you know, whatever you want to call it. I let myself kind of be led by that. You know, what feels balanced, what feels like it's working, what doesn't feel like it's working, and let that kind of be the guide.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the pieces that you put time into that ultimately don't go anywhere. I mean, do I hear you saying you learn a lot from that? I mean, you understand maybe some approaches you don't want to take going forward. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's almost a 50-50 thing, going into situations where you already know that this isn't going to work. I've tried this before. And sometimes it's more vague and sometimes it's specific. Like, this subject matter is very hard to pull off in this setting. It's very hard to paint, you know, this color horse with this surrounding area. I spent a lot of time on that. And I couldn't make it work. So some of it's more specific, and some of it is just the direction you're going with this light and this color. You got to do something different than you did last time because it didn't work. So, yeah. And that's incredibly valuable, knowing what works just as much as knowing what doesn't.
Well, Colt, appreciate that diagram on your creative process and just for taking time with us today. And most of all, thank you for your participation in Art in Action and your longtime support to the C.M. Russell Museum. It means a great deal to us.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks, everyone. Truly, it's my honor as an artist to be a part of it. And I hope to be part of it for a long time to come.
Well, absolutely. We hope we can see you in person in 2021. That's we're keeping our fingers crossed that the world and the situation provides for that. So thank you, everyone, for connecting in on this artist showcase. We once again thank D.A. Davidson Companies for their support of Art in Action and all education programming at the C.M. Russell Museum. Also, we've had gracious donors who have sponsored our ability to have each of these artists participate in Art in Action. Carol Cole has provided sponsorship for Colt Idol, and her sponsorship benefits the C.M. Russell Museum. So Carol, thank you for your support to the C.M. Russell Museum as well. And thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for another artist showcase. Take care. Thank you.